see.
What I can't see is the advanced part, right?
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much, folks. I'm really pleased to be here today. I just want to make two preliminary observations. First of all, Tuesday was International Women's Day. And I want to tell you that throughout the Canadian Forces, but in the Canadian Navy, including the Canadian Forces, all trades, all qualifications are open to women. The main thing that had to be done, particularly in the Navy, was in the submarines, because they had to come up with segregated accommodations and a second set of washing areas. Okay. But otherwise, women can serve everywhere in the Canadian Navy, and they do. We have had a captain of one of our frigates who was a woman, and last fall they opened a new facility here at HMCS Carleton in Dow's Lake. And at Carleton, the CO and the XO, plus the Commodore for the Naval Reserves across Canada, are all women. As I was saying to Linda, in 1975, which was International Women's Year, I was a Naval Reserve officer, and I helped train our first class of women officer cadets who were trained as real officers. Okay? So the reality is that's what happens, but it does take 2 generations to make it happen.
One of our former members, Mary Rosenberg, her daughter is, I'm not sure if she's a captain, naval captain, or one level here. Or maybe higher than that.
Lieutenant Colonel, like, or
Lieutenant. Anyway, she's in the Navy.
Commander.
She came and told us the story of her almost crashing one of the ships that she was driving.
Sure, of course.
Anyways.
She was a graduate of RMC.
Yes, indeed. Okay,
yeah.
Now these are 2 Canadian frigates. This is called the Halifax class of frigates. This is the main warship that Canada has. We have a dozen like this. Now, could you see at the end there, Sue?
Yes,
you can. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks a little wrinkled there. It's got to do with the screen. Here's what the Canadian Navy is all about. Our job is to control our home waters. You must be able to do that. We provide national security in an ever more unruly world. As you will have noticed here the week before last, NATO suddenly decided that it was going to put ships into the Eastern Mediterranean. After taking 3 months to decide what we were going to do in Syria and Iraq, the new government of Canada sent HMCS Fredericton in 3 days. Now, she already happened to be in the area, but the point is they made that kind of decision, and that's the kind of thing you can do with the Navy. We support our friends and oppressed peoples. That's what the Eastern Mediterranean is about. And we also help to face natural disasters around the world. And I'll show you something with respect to Haiti, which is a perfect example of having done the Haiti earthquake. We also try to maintain high-value jobs and modern technology across Canada. That will be our new shipbuilding program. And we work towards ensuring the ongoing prosperity of Canadian global markets. And the reason that the last item is up there is because 70% of the surface of the Earth is ocean. Okay? It carries 90% of all the trade in the world, including every cell phone that everyone has in their pocket and every widescreen TV that you have at home. That all arrived in Canada in a ship. Now, this is what shipping trade patterns look like. If you look at the far right, those are the 5,000 journeys, routes and ports. All right, 5,000 journeys is like 200 ships a day. And you will notice that does, so we're going to try the button here on the top. Where did it go? No? Show me where sorry, I'm trying to do my pointer is.
Right there.
Right there. Oh, that includes Vancouver as one of the 5,000 journeys per year ports. Coming up the St. Lawrence River in the Great Lakes, it's not quite 5,000, but it is in the Orange Range, which is in here. And also on the East Coast, ships come in at a high rate to Halifax and St. John, but you don't get up into the very high rates like Vancouver because you have a distribution of essentially 3 ports on the Atlantic coast. We have the longest coastline in the world. Right? No question about it. So why the heck do you need Navy? You've got the longest coastline in the world, over 300 harbors. And even notwithstanding the massive trade that we do, a couple of $1 billion a day, as the Prime Minister and President were talking about today, Canada-U.S. land borders, still 50% of all of our trade comes by ships, including all of the oil that's coming up the St. Lawrence River as we speak. $170 billion a year in trade. Now, this is why Canada is a maritime nation. Yes, everybody knows East Coast, West Coast, and of course, in the last decade, of course, we're talking about from ocean to sea to sea to sea. But what you have to pay attention to is the fact, look at the St. Lawrence River the St. Lawrence Seaway, and the Great Lakes. Look at how far into Canada, halfway across Canada, we're connected to the ocean. Of the provinces of Canada, the only two that do not have an ocean port are Saskatchewan and Alberta. If you say to someone in Saskatchewan wheat or potash, they need a port. They are interested. They are major port provinces. And in Alberta, of course, the entire debate over pipelines is all about taking Alberta oil to tidewater. So the oceans are important to all 10 Canadian provinces. Now, and I'll be happy to go over this in detail with anyone who wants to ask later, because one of the things I did at Foreign Affairs was I did international law of the sea. But this is just a real quick summary of how it works. The dark blue is Canadian sovereignty. All right? Those are territorial or internal waters. The light blue is what's known as the exclusive economic zone. It's from 12 to 200 nautical miles off coast. Essentially, Canada owns and controls the water column and the seabed, which means, of course, drilling, but only those aspects. And the red lines are the new boundaries, or the new boundaries that we're working on. Those places in the world, there are only a couple of dozen of them, where the continental shelf goes out beyond 200 nautical miles. Continental shelf means water less than 200 meters deep. Excuse me. There is a procedure under the Law of the Sea Convention which allows you to register a claim to those extended boundaries. We've got that in the Atlantic, and we have it in the Arctic. There will be a problem, no real problem. For example, all of this in here is all decided already with the Danes because of Greenland. So no one will challenge us around here, except our good friends the French, who are in Saint-Pierre-Miquelon. Of course, they always challenge you for everything. In the Arctic, we will have what will be known as overlaps. The 5 countries in the Arctic, Canada, US, Denmark for Greenland, Norway, and Russia will all have claims in the Arctic. They will all overlap. But there is a system for working it out, okay, legally. We won't fight over it. People who want to make trouble will say it's undecided, and we could cause, that's essentially nonsense. And we don't have any continental claims in the West Coast, because the West Coast is very deep, very fast. Okay? Now, where we have boundary disputes for Canada, they are with the U.S. here in the it's called the AB line, south of the Queen Charlotte's, Haida Gwaii. Sorry, north of the Queen Charlotte's. And we also have the boundary between Alaska and the Yukon, and we have our tiny spot up here, which is Hans Island with the Danes. All of those are well managed, and I'll be happy to go into those in detail if anyone wants to know. That is a picture of a submarine at work. Okay? The beauty of a submarine and why a country needs them is it is the ultimate stealth machine. 40 countries in the world have submarines. The country with the longest coastline in the world has to have submarines, if for no other reason than to watch out for the other guy's submarine, because the best thing to have a submarine is a submarine. Now, that's a submarine relaxing, okay? Up for a breath of fresh air, just so you know what it looks like. We have 4. We bought them from the British secondhand. And of course, as you know, we bought a bag of hammers is what we got. It's taken 10 years to get them all operational. They finally are. What the Navy will have to do for itself is it will have to work like crazy to make very good use of them, so the Canadians will believe that we need them at the end of their lifetime in another 10 or 15 years. But just to give you as an example, a smaller country with a smaller continental shelf and all this is Australia. Australia has 6 at the moment, and they're planning to build 12 more. Okay, so you have to. It's something that you have to be serious about. And for us, the real answer, and these ships are only modestly good at it, where submarines are particularly useful is in the Arctic, right? Because they can go under the ice. Now, here's a problem, of course. These British submarines that we bought, although obviously that's a submarine super steel hull, that is not a submarine super steel sail. Okay, those submarines cannot go into the Arctic and punch up through the ice like you see U.S. nuclear submarines do. And yes, of course, the answer is if we were sensible. All right, the submarines we would get from the Canadian Arctic would be nuclear. That's the one thing that could go there 12 months of the year, okay, and do its job. But I'm a realist. I do not believe that the people who live in Pickering, Ontario, would vote for nuclear submarines for Canada, or for nuclear icebreakers for Canada. I don't think they would. Right? 50% of the lights in this room are running because of nuclear power. How many people want to pay for a nuclear submarine in this room? Answer? Yes, 1? Okay, thanks, Linda. And she was in the Army. Sorry, yes, I'm in this room. Now, the beauty of a maritime vessel, a warship, is you can send it anywhere, almost at any time, to do whatever needs to be done. All right, now what a ship like that can be doing is on its way to the Horn of Africa, where we've had ships going back and forth for the last, ever since, actually here's what we did. On 9/11, as you know, it's a bit hard to get it in your mind now, but on 9/11, the Americans were absolutely struck in their solar plexus, right? And the answer was, everybody didn't have much time for George W. Bush, but the answer was, you're my friend or you're my enemy. And I don't care whether it was Obama or George W. Bush on 9/11. That was what the United States said to the world. Okay, and the reality was, Canada had 3 ships in Halifax who were scheduled to go to the Caribbean in the next week. They were sent to the Horn of Africa to be into the Arabian Sea in support of the American activity. And this is a picture, and we've kept that up ever since as part of our contribution to Afghanistan. And now we've shifted the focus. Now HMCS Rotary going into the Bosphorus to be into the Black Sea because of the Russians and Crimea. Okay, you have keeping in mind, as you well know, the 3 largest Ukrainian populations in the world are in Ukraine, Russia, and Canada. Okay, so it doesn't mean a heck of a lot to those of us who live here in Ottawa, but I can tell you anywhere in Western Canada, you will have to, and I'll be completely apolitical here tonight, right? Obviously, Harper would have sent a ship to Crimea, but if Trudeau doesn't send a ship to back up Crimea, he's out of his mind. Okay, all right. So essentially, what we've done is our ship that was operating there, which is at the moment the Fredericton, has just been redeployed to this NATO squadron in the Eastern Mediterranean. Stand by to watch for one of 2 things happening in the next month or 2, right? Now they're trying very hard to be in there. They're going to help. The job is to take your sophisticated sensors and try to find all of these vessels as they're coming and tell the Turks so that the Turkish Coast Guard can go out there and sweep them back. Okay? That's all part of the process. Get people out of the Aegean, stop them dying, and at the same time, you will have seen the big deal that they made on refugees between Europe and Turkey in yesterday's matter. So this is that's what they are there to do. It is inevitable that they are either going to come across a refugee boat, or they're going to come across a refugee boat and there are going to be bad guys aboard. Okay? Both of those things are going to have to be dealt with by a Canadian warship. And the way we do it is we alternate between the east and the west coast. We send 1 ship out at a time. And when you say, 1 ship at a time, that isn't much. We got a dozen. Well, the answer is, as Linda will be happy to explain to you, whenever you send something out and keep it there, these ships go on 6-month deployments, you have a ship that has just come back, and you have another ship that is ready to go, or getting ready to go. So 1 ship is actually 3. Okay, so when we put 1 ship on the in the Eastern Mediterranean, that's 3 of our 12 ships. We have 1 ship ready to go in Halifax all the time. That's 3 more ships. 6. 1 ship ready to go in Esquimalt all the time. That's 9. Okay, we have 12 ships. So you can see how much slack there is. And the answer is none whatsoever. As a result, these are Kingston-class minor war vessels for naval reserves. These were built in the 1990s to be naval reserve training vessels, and we're using them with great effect on something called Operation Carib. They're working with the Americans in the Caribbean, dealing with drug interdiction. Okay? They will carry a boarding party from the U.S. Coast Guard, and they will go out and do surveillance, make arrests. And they have come up with multi-million-dollar cocaine busts done by these vessels. Same time, the other thing we did this year with the Kingston-class vessels is, for the first time ever, we sent 2 from Halifax and 2 from Esquimalt, and we sent them both into the Arctic. Okay, so that Canada's exercise of sovereignty, I have no doubt that is all Canadian water and territory, don't worry about it. But nonetheless, you must constantly be seen to exercise your sovereignty. And this year we did our sovereignty exercise with 4 minor war vessels. They didn't get to meet. They did get within a couple hundred miles. We'll see whether next year they can get to meet. It's the first time it's ever been done from the Pacific. Now, these are Canadian sailors in Haiti. And this is why I say they're exceptionally valuable. Once again, what you can do with a naval ship, hey, the one that's in standby in Halifax, on whatever date it is that the Haiti earthquake is up, right? Once NVHQ does its machinations here in Ottawa, they'll say, we need to get some people. Canadians need to be seen to be on the ground. You have to get in there and rescue Canadians, and then you have to get in there and help. Okay? Each one of our ships will carry a helicopter. Okay? You do know how old the helicopters are, huh? 1965 is when we bought the helicopter.
40,000 bolts flying in close formation.
Exactly, 40,000 volts, close formation. Okay? So each of these ships will have a helicopter. What each of these ships will also have is they will have a doctor and some what we call TIFFs, medical people. So they will be very useful there, and you can get them in a heartbeat. Right? And the other thing that's always interesting that the Navy can do for this kind of thing, every ship will have a group of sailors, small group, half a dozen or so. They're called hull techs. Right? They work on things that go wrong with the actual frame of the ship. But one of the things that they do is they learn to work with wood, because you use wood as framing when you have a leak. It's how you do the damage control. So as a consequence, you got a half dozen people on your ship who are handy with woodwork, know what they're doing, and they've got some tools, right? And you got 220 people who will do what they're told, and they're not stupid. Okay? So that when a ship like that shows up with 250 people aboard, that is a very valuable piece of kit. It will also, of course, have a capability for manufacturing fresh water, which is useful. Yes?
In Hollywood movies, they show all kinds of ship movies and submarines, and they get these leaks, and suddenly the ship personnel have all this wood. And I thought, oh yeah, right, they carry all this wood. Are you telling me that our naval ships do carry a supply of wood?
They do carry, I'll call it a supply.
A supply, not a lot.
supply of wood, yes. It's an entirely metal ship, but they carry a supply of wood. And you know the other thing they carry is a whole bunch of wooden plugs. And they will be from the size of wine corks, right, to, you know, I won't say barrel tops, but, you know, like this.
And duct tape, probably.
Yeah, no, pain in the head. Manhandle, you know, hit it with the PV. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's quite a skill. Now, and this is what makes the Navy go, okay? It is the people. We recruit young men and women from across the Canada, all walks of life. They're highly educated, highly trained, professional, supported, and they're recognized on a global basis as world class. I don't have a slide for this, but I'm going to get you one, or I will put it in. The one thing that can be said about the Canadian Navy is it is the only Navy in the world which the United States Navy will permit to serve as an escort to an aircraft carrier. Okay? Only a Canadian frigate is allowed to do that. You know, the Brits will talk about, you know, I'm your closest ally, and France, we're your first friend, and Israel will die for you forever. There's only one Navy in the world which is allowed to send a frigate in, you know, every time an aircraft carrier goes out, there's half a dozen ships going around. Only a Canadian can do that. And that is because of the capability of the people, not only the capability and the interoperability of our ships. You have to have American equipment or things that will work with American equipment. Otherwise, for example, again, I'll say things you're not supposed to say. You know, when we're going to get new airplanes, the idea of buying European airplanes, fighter aircraft, is nuts. Okay? Because the United States, the equipment won't work together. And when you're flying somewhere in North America and you need a new piece of kit, if you're flying, you know, a French Mirage or a Rafale or a British Eurofighter, similar, and by the same token, as will happen a lot of the time. An American aircraft is flying in or near Canada and has a problem, you can land and we can fix it.
Do the Navy's exchange crews as well?
We do numbers of exchange assignments on American ships. That does happen. And indeed, at the early stages of the Iraq War, the number 2 in the Army division that came out of Texas was a Canadian. And because the Iraq War happened in a pretty quick hurry, that officer went. Okay, they did not substitute him with an American officer. Oh, here's another one, even better. Do you know that on the day of 9/11, North American Air Defense, right, Command, Colorado Springs, Colorado, there's a duty director sitting at the desk. And that person, I'll use the expression had to fight, that person had to manage North America for that day. Okay? That was a Canadian, and it was a naval officer. It just happened to be. Okay? But what is amazing to be able to say on behalf of our people, and American respect for our people, is they did not come out, you know, when 9/11 is happening, nobody came up and tapped this officer in the shoulder and said, okay, son, it's mine. which is what you'd see in a movie. But the reality is that we did that. And of course, you know, the other thing we did on 9/11, you know that there was only one airplane in North America that tripped its hijack alert. You know this story? Airplane is coming in, it's Korean Airlines, good heavens, bad record. It's coming into Anchorage, Alaska, right? And the pilot accidentally tripped his alarm. He didn't know that he'd done it, so he didn't even know that he'd done it. Of course, so the Americans are going nuts. They do not want him in Anchorage, Alaska because of Elmendorf Air Force Base, huge American air base. They don't want him there. And they also don't want an airplane that might run into the end of the Valdez and the oil pipeline. Okay? So we've got to get this airplane somewhere safe. Where's the next safe airport? You know the closest safe airport to Anchorage, Alaska? Whitehorse in the Yukon. Okay? Now, through NORAD, Canada accepted an aircraft into our airspace, which might have been a bad guy, right? We accepted that aircraft into our airspace with what one might have thought it was a bad guy. We accepted it with two American F-16s on the wingtips. When that happened, I was posted in Los Angeles at the time, and I used to love to say to my American friends, never in a million years would an aircraft be escorted into Tijuana, Mexico, with two U.S. aircraft on the wingtips. That wouldn't happen. Even if they were going to blow up the world, they wouldn't care. And last but not least, of course, when the airplane got down there, the other thing that Canada has, credit our RCMP, we have a real national police force. So notwithstanding the fact that all you have to turn out to inspect this aircraft are, quote, the local police, they're RCMP officers, okay? And they're all trained. Now, it turned out to be, there was no problem. Therefore, there's no news story, right? And there were no American heroes to be written up in the press. So that's the story. But those are the sorts of things that we can and do in Canada. Now, this is the existing strategy. We're going to have a new defense strategy, of course, from the new government. No doubt, you'll call it whatever you want, but of course we will have a homeland defense aspect, which is called Canada First. It will be interesting. I think that obviously we'll keep the Northern strategy in place, considering what Mr. Putin is up to. Probably won't call it that, or maybe, you know, hide it away because we're so closely attached with Harper. And then the most important part is they have a national shipbuilding procurement strategy. Now, this is really important for Canada, for Canadians, for people on both coasts, and for people who live and work here in Ottawa. And I'll show you why. We have to be able to do our sovereignty. We have to be able to pursue freedom of the seas. We have to be committed to assisting our friends. And we have to be able to deal with threats from as far away as possible. These are the ships and equipment that we have to work with. These are our dozen frigates, okay? Halifax class, built between 88 and 92 in St. John and Quebec City, Davie Shipbuilding. But in those days, as soon as that contract is over, there's no more. So the reality was that St. John Shipbuilding was closed by 1995. Built half dozen world-class ships in 92. There's no more business. It's closed in 95. The shipbuilding program is about having picked a shipyard on the East Coast and a shipyard on the West Coast and given them each 20 years worth of work. The idea is you go from ship to ship to ship, and presumably by the time you get to the end of the years of 20 years worth, there's more. You go back and start over again. So that's what's critically important. We had four, they're called Trident class destroyers. We still have one. What they have is really sophisticated anti-aircraft capability, which is really important in the modern world. We're down to one, Athabaskan. She will disappear, and then hopefully...
That's the last of the DDH-280s?
DDH-280s, yeah, exactly. We have our submarines. Now, and here are our new shipborne helicopters called Cyclones. And once again, I'm going to be completely apolitical. These are the helicopters which are going to replace the Sea Kings. Okay? The Sea Kings, of course, there was a contract let to replace the Sea Kings in 1992. Okay? Jean Chrétien became the Prime Minister and he said, oh, they're too expensive, they're Cadillacs, we can do better. Does this remind you of something you've heard about F-35s? Okay. And the answer is, that's 1992 and this is 2016.
We still haven't got it.
The airplanes are coming into the Navy in the next few months.
And it's the same aircraft that was canceled, isn't it?
No, it actually isn't.
Is this the Cyclone?
No, this is the Sikorsky. The other one was a Eurocopter.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, and because as long as Chrétien was in government, you couldn't do anything. So Martin did start the process that eventually got these helicopters. So when you say, and you know, there's a ton of politics in this, but when people say, oh, forget the F-35s, they're too expensive, take a good look at the 75 CF-18s we have today, because you may be looking at them in the Canadian Air Force 22 years from now, if you're not smart. Simply because it's just never as simple.
45s and they're mothballs. They'll never fall apart.
That is, yeah. Well, well, here's the other thing. Keep this in mind. You know that when we bought the CF-18s, Pierre Trudeau bought the CF-18s, we bought 125. Mm-hmm. We're proposing to replace them with 65 F-35s. Mm-hmm. Did Canada suddenly get that much smaller? Mm-hmm. And the Italians are buying F-35s? Mm-hmm. They're buying 95. Did Italy get that much bigger than Canada? I didn't think so. Okay, we have our submarines. Our maritime patrol aircraft. This is really interesting. We've got an old plane. It's called an Aurora, which is basically built on an Electra. This is a Lockheed Electra from the from just before the 707 days. But it's an exceptionally good aircraft, and essentially we've rebuilt the whole thing from start to finish, and we're going to keep on rebuilding it. And of course, what we're finding is in places like the Middle East, they're really, really good. Because an aircraft with a set of sensors, which is designed to find the snorkel on a submarine in the middle of an ocean that's going like this, is also really good at finding anything in the desert. Okay? So that's really good. And another story which is just amazing is having to do as well with the Auroras. As a result of the world fiscal crisis, the big recession of 08-09, the British in 2010, they scrapped their entire long-range patrol aircraft fleet. They were old airplanes too, and they just got rid of them. Well, guess what's happening now in the new Putin era? Russian submarines are starting to sniff around the UK submarine base in Scotland. Okay, and the Brits had no capability from the air to do anything about it. Guess what we did? We sent an Aurora. We sent an Aurora from Greenwood to help them take a look. And we also sent one of our submarines to help them out as well. Okay? Can I tell you, it's a crazy world. These are our coastal patrol vessels, and now you've heard them, of course we need drones. For crying out loud, the second largest landmass in the world, of course we need drones. And they will be, because, you need this to do some sort of stuff, but here's your out, you're going to go out and check the coastline for every day of the week, every month of the year, with a radar, but yes, of course, it does need a missile on it. If it doesn't have a missile on it, what the heck's it good for? It's going to go out there and do this, right? So we do need to get drones. Okay, now this is where the Canadian Navy exists. We have 1 destroyer and 7 frigates on the east coast and 5 frigates on the west coast. The other balance, the only 1 submarine on the east coast, 3 on the west coast. The reason for 3 subs on the west coast is they do the maintenance at Esquimalt. And 6 coastal defense vessels on either coast. Plus 24 naval reserve divisions across the country, which is the Navy's outreach and presence in the civilian population. Now, here's what's interesting with shipbuilding. This is why shipbuilding is important to people here in Ottawa. These multi-billion-dollar contracts, okay, they're all based on what's known as leakage, right? The contracts are led with Irving in Halifax and Seaspan in Vancouver. Irving will build all the warships, and Seaspan will build everything for the Coast Guard, for the fisheries, and the non-combatants for the Navy. And the idea is to spread it out over 20 years. And if they get good at it, the prices will come down. In the early going, will nobody know what the prices is? That's true. Can Jason Moscovich go on TV and do another attack? Yes, he can. But Irving themselves have spent $700 million building that facility in Halifax. Okay? Now, what's important for people living here in Ottawa, other than why am I paying for this, is it's called leakage. 8 out of every $10 that are quote-unquote spent on a ship in Halifax actually ends up getting spent somewhere else. Okay? And no more frequently than in Ontario. Okay? And plenty of it right here in Ottawa. I've got a news item over there which I'll be happy to show you for the new patrol vessels, Arctic patrol vessels we're going to get. They have let a $170 million contract to Lockheed Martin of Kanata. All right? And that facility in Kanata, every time you see a number put on a ship in Halifax, you know, and it's the software integration, Okay, the software integration for those ships will not be done in Nova Scotia. That software integration for those ships will be done in Canada. Now, here's the next generation. This is the first to come out is the Arctic Offshore Patrol Vessel. This turns out to be an idea which is right on time. Okay, when the government made this plan, you know, the world was comfy. But of course, since the world was comfy, Putin has become very uncomfortable. And he is reestablishing all of his presence in the Arctic. And these ships are going to be big. They are 6,000 tons. Okay? Our current frigates are 4,000 tons. Right? So it's half again as big as one of our frigates. It is lightly armed. It is meant to do a presence. It carries helicopters. It carries all kinds of stuff. It can land trucks and snowmobiles and four wheels, everything, yada, yada, yada. And it can carry boxes and containers. The whole idea is to be self-sustaining in the Arctic. And what's critically important about it is that it can steam steadily through 3 feet of ice. Now, the critics will say it's not an icebreaker, and the answer is, you're right, it is not an icebreaker. An icebreaker can steam between 8 and 12 feet of ice. Okay, but you think about 3 feet of ice, and think about how good it would be to have a vessel that can do that. The answer is it can go in, that means it can operate in the Gulf of St. Lawrence all year round. And the other real difference that's important about this is there are only 2 other navies in the whole world that have ice-breaking capability warships, and that's Denmark and Norway. The United States Navy does not have a surface ship which can sail in ice. The Russian Navy does not have a warship which can sail in ice. The Royal Navy, the French Navy, the Chinese Navy, nobody does. Okay, so the fact that we are they've cut steel in September, and the first of the ships will appear in 2018, and the answer is they will appear right on time. Just, I mean, you know, it's good luck and good management, but nonetheless, it's the right idea. Next in line, and this will come from the West Coast, is the Joint Support Ship. One of the things that did happen, you know, the Navy has been, if you in the Plains article this time last year, right? And where we went completely down the tubes with supply ships, we had 3, but then eventually 2 of them. They were also built by K.C. Irving. They were excellent, but they were 50 years old. Okay, the one on the East Coast rusted out. The one on the West Coast caught fire. So at the moment, you can send a frigate out, and a frigate can go across the ocean at 15 knots on a diesel engine. Fine and dandy, no problem. But you can't do any business. A warship, to be able to do business, has to be able to get out there and scurry around at 25 or 30 knots. And of course, when you do that, you inhale fuel. That's why you must have the replenishment ship. At the moment, we're borrowing one of the Atlantic from the Spaniards. We're borrowing one of the Pacific from the Chileans. Davie Shipbuilding has made a successful offer to take a container ship and modify it and have it ready in 2 years. As a stopgap, so you know what's going on. When you see all this business in the news now about how the shipbuilding program isn't any good, there's all kinds of, you know, what that is all about, I'll be absolutely candid with you, is that when they did the contract, the competition, Davie Shipbuilding in Quebec City was out of business. They were bankrupt. So one wins in Halifax and one wins in Esquimalt, or Vancouver. Well, Davie Shipbuilding has come back to life. Okay, particularly with a new government, with an orientation in that part of the world. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get into the business. So the first thing you do is you get lots of news stories out there. And then, of course, you offer to do this. And there was an item in the paper today that they've made an offer to build these. An unsolicited proposal. Okay? But essentially what this is all about is it's Davie Shipbuilding trying to get in on a contract that's already been let. We'll see. Now, this is just a proposal. There's no idea exactly what it might look like. But we do need a surface combatant. Okay? Needless to say, having 3 Tribal class and 12 Halifax to replace, you'll want 15. Okay? Yes, of course they will be expensive. Yes, of course they will be much more expensive than the last round of ships we had, but they will also be unbelievably more capable. So, watch this space. Irving has the general contract to do this. How the ships will be built, that is for the warships is yet to be determined. But do be cautious of the idea of building them offshore or getting someone else's second hand. Right? When you say to me, I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia. When you say to me, oh, we'll just buy it offshore. Okay? Then the answer is, okay, then the government of Canada should only drive Hyundais. We don't need any more GMCs in Southern Ontario. And for airplanes, well, we can fly Boeing. We don't need Bombardier. Okay? I say to you, as a Canadian from Halifax, if we can't build warships in Halifax, what the hell do you think we can do except take Pogie? Is that what you want us for? Okay. And when it comes to buying used ships, the answer is, you know, we've got the submarines. So if you want more of that, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, conclusion. It is a maritime nation. We must take steps to protect and further our interests, both in home waters and with our friends in distant waters. Therefore, we need a robust, multi-purpose Royal Canadian Navy. And there's a recruiting officer if you want to join. Okay, questions? Oh, good. Got away with it. All right.